What's up, guys? Welcome back to another opportunity for us to share on the Unmuted with PG. Y'all know this is our platform where we get to kind of share in a variety of topics. We've been using this platform to talk about mental health, to talk about a variety of things, and we're excited. The month of May is Family Month for our church, and I hope that you've been tuning in as we've been trying to give you insight. I know many of you are itching to do some things with your families during the summer, and so I hope that you are being safe and that you are navigating that space and still doing some marvelous things with your families. Listen, I'm excited tonight as we're going to lift up a very unique conversation, one that I think is very needed within our community. And we're going to talk about tonight blended families. That's right. How do we navigate blended families? Listen, many of you know my story. I was adopted by my grandparents at 14 months of age. And so basically, I was raised in a blended family. My mom, she got remarried. And so my sisters were raised in a blended family. And so there are some unique opportunities and things that happen with blended families. And we're so excited to share tonight just a couple of amazing families within the context of our church. We're excited to have the Williams with us tonight, and they brought the whole clan with them. And so we're so excited that they're with us, Alexis and Cameron. So very proud of them and their amazing family. We're grateful to have Brittany with us tonight. And she has a very unique story and how she has come into parenthood and how that looks like and what that looks like. So we're just going to have a fun, robust conversation tonight because here's the truth. Most of our families are not what most people would call the typical traditional nuclear family, right? Growing up, we were told, husband, wife, 2.5 kids, a dog, white picket fence, and a minivan. And that's not a lot of people's reality. And for many of you who are out there viewing us, you live with more what we consider non-traditional blended families, and you're making it work and you're successful and you're doing that. So we really want to show that tonight, just an opportunity to have these kind of conversations. And we're so grateful for the Williams and for Brittany sharing with us on tonight. All right, I'm going to give them an opportunity to introduce themselves. And first of all, we're going to talk to the Williams. We see them just looking all stately there and looking all amazing. They got that high-speed internet. And so we're grateful for them. So Alexis, Cameron, go ahead and introduce yourselves and those sweet little children you got right there. I know that middle one, the little boy, he drooled on me some years ago, and I'm gonna keep talking about that. But I love them anyway. So Alexis and Cameron, come on, introduce your family to us.
Okay, I'm Alexis, and this is Mason, Avery, and my husband Cameron. We've been married we've been married almost 2 years now.
Who did your wedding? I think I may know the person. Who did your wedding?
I'm not exactly sure. I think it was maybe Pastor Goodman from like Tabernacle or something. Yeah, he did it. He did an amazing job. You should really meet him. It was a really good.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Well, good to see you guys.
Mason is 6, and then Avery, she'll be 4 months this week.
She is so precious, and look at that hair she got. She got it from her mama because we see she did not get it from her father. So we're so grateful to have y'all here tonight with us and thankful for you. Brittany, talk to us and introduce yourself and just share with us who you are and your family.
Hello, my name is Brittany Bush. I'm also a member of Tabernacle. I have a 3-year-old who is not here today. It's about her bedtime, so she's in bed, so she won't be with us this evening. But I am a teacher here in Richmond County, and that really plays a part into my story and how I became a mom, which we'll share that, I'm assuming, a little bit later.
Yes. Thank you so much. And so we're so grateful to have you here. Now, listen, when we get into it, Brittany, let's go ahead and share your story. I think what you have is very powerful. And then I want the Williams to kind of share their unique story. And then we're just going to throw you some questions, guys. We have some amazing people who's watching with you. I know your family and friends are supporting you tonight. And I just love the unique stories that many people get. Because, most times we don't know everyone's story. Like we see people, and we think we know people, but we do not truly know their story. So I'm going to give Brittany an opportunity. She's going to kick us off tonight. I want you to tell your story. And then the Williams, I want y'all to share your story. And then we'll kind of go back and forth and talk about some of the challenges, some of the opportunities, and begin to kind of lead that out so that people can get a real well-rounded idea of this whole idea of blended family. So Brittany, tell us a story. That's incredible. You talked about your 3-year-old. Now bring us up. Talk to us about that story for you, because I think it's so powerful.
Okay, so about 2.5 years ago, almost 3 years, I was a 5th grade teacher at an elementary school here in Richmond County. And one of my students I noticed was having some difficulties in school. And I actually reached out to a mutual friend that I didn't know at the time knew the family history and the family story. And she just told me, to watch out for her because her mom had some struggles. But the agency that she worked for was helping the mom and the children kind of stay on track. But things kind of fell by the wayside, and the children weren't coming to school. I called her and let her know that I had not seen her in over a week and I was getting concerned. Didn't know at that time that they had been evicted, and they were living in a hotel. And so they were trying to get them back and forth to school, but it wasn't working and mom wasn't being compliant. She also has some issues with mental health and some drug issues. So that kind of played a part into her judgment as far as getting her children the things that they needed. The very next day, I was notified by my principal that they were going to have to put the children into foster care. And so I asked her if I could talk to my student before they took her, because she also had 2 younger brothers that went to our school too. And she said that she didn't think that that would be a good idea because, most kids get scared if you tell them that they're not going home to their family. Well, the opposite happened because they did not tell her. She kind of just lost it. And by her being the oldest, she felt responsible for her younger brothers. And she felt like she needed to protect them. And she also felt like she needed to protect her mother. And since she wasn't being told what was going on, she had a lot of questions and she was being sort of defiant. But I guess, at that age, she was only 10. So at that age, you don't really know how to react to something like that or how to channel your feelings appropriately. So hers came out in anger and frustration. I later found out that afternoon that they had a placement for her 2 brothers, but they didn't have anywhere for her to go. A lot of times foster parents don't want to take older children, especially older children who display some behavior concerns. So the solution was to put her in the Salvation Army for a night or 2 until they could find somewhere for her to go. And I said, absolutely not. She's not going to the Salvation Army. She can just come to my home. And at first they told me that they couldn't do that. But before I was a teacher, I was a social worker, and I knew that you could. Like, I could be considered what's called fictive kin. And the worker at the time was new, and so she didn't know anything about fictive kin. So I used my resources that I had to make a couple of phone calls to get her placed with me. And they told me at that time that because I wasn't a foster parent, I couldn't receive any resources or anything for her. And I said that was fine. I just didn't want her to be in a foster care placement. I mean, in a shelter. At that age, you just don't know what could happen to a child in that state. So before I could leave work, I got a call asking if I could take her little sister too. Now, at that time, I had no kids. I was living in a 2-bedroom apartment. And I'm like, you want me to take 2 kids? And you're telling me that I can't get any resources, like no financial assistance or anything? And so they, my friend kind of convinced me because she works down at DFAX and they didn't want the oldest to be placed by herself. They wanted her to at least go with one of her siblings. So the 2 boys would go together and they wanted the 2 girls to come together. And so I said, okay.
And you did not know the youngest.
I didn't even know there was a baby. I only knew that it was the 3 that went to my school. I didn't know anything about a younger baby. So when I asked them how old the youngest child was, they told me 2. So then they show up at my house with an 8-month-old baby. I didn't know how to fix formula. Like, I didn't know anything. I mean, they literally dropped them off on that Thursday night with the clothes on their back, a can of formula, and a pack and play. And they told me that I could find a daycare and they would pay for daycare, but that's all that I could get for them. So at that time, my school, my church members, different people heard about what was going on. And within 48 hours, I had more than what I needed for them. I mean, it's still mind blowing. I mean, like I didn't have, the funds because, teachers, we don't get paid until the end of the month. So when I got them, it was on the 20th. And I'm like, Lord, I don't know how we're going to do this, how we're going to make it with 2 extra mouths to feed, formula to buy, diapers to buy. Like, I just don't know. But for 3 months, I didn't have to buy diapers or formula. I mean, like, it was literally people driving up to my house with stuff in their trunk. Like, I mean, an overflow. It was nothing but God.
Wow. How old is the oldest one? The oldest one is how old?
She's 13 now.
She's 13, but she was at that time was how old?
10.
10.
So she was about to have a birthday. So she had her 11th birthday with me that same month that she came to me. Okay. So she throughout the process, I learned that there were 2 more kids, that they had 2 more siblings that were also in foster care that I knew nothing about. They were placed in a different foster home, and they're actually in between the 3 oldest and Zoe. So there were 2 more in between there. So we would get all 6 kids together for visitation because Zoe didn't know, she had never met those other 2 because they never lived in the home with her. They were taken at a young age too. So fast forward, the oldest 3 ended up going with their dad. So their dad got custody of them, but because Zoe has a different dad, there was no place for her to go. So she's now with me, and she's 3 now, and we're almost at the end, ready for adoption.
Wow. So the oldest one, the original one that was in your class, stayed with you how long? And then now she's with her biological father. Okay.
Yes. So she stayed with me about 1.5 years.
Yeah. Precious girl too. So this young child that you were told initially was 2, which was actually 8 months old, that you had no idea about, comes as this package deal with your student to your house. What started out a couple nights, and here you are, you say we're 2 years later, and she's such a precious little thing, and now you're getting close to adoption. Tell me, fill in that blank real quick, and then I'll go to Williams, get their story. But how did that go? How was it when you initially got this young 8-month-old? You saying you didn't know about formula, about no diapers. Here you are, a single teacher, living on a teacher wage. And, I've been advocating we need to pay our teachers more. Amen. If we can pay for wars, we ought to pay for education. But we'll push that through later on. So talk to me about that. So when you saw this young girl, right, and 8 months old, tell me, what was your experience? What was that like? Someone who had you considered that week, that by the end of the week I'd be a mom? I mean,
No, it literally was on a Thursday at 9:00 when I became a mom on September 20th, 2018.
Wow.
But that little girl came with a lot of challenges. She was addicted to drugs. I don't know if a lot of people know that. So having a baby that, for one, was breastfed, and also used to getting her fix from her mom, and me not being able to breastfeed and not being able to give her that high that she's looking for, it was rough. Like especially the first night. I thank God for my mom, my friends, they came over, but that cry is something that I will never forget. And she was scared of water. She had just gotten rid of lice. So it was a lot of things that we had to overcome, like those first months or so, because she was very sick. And we constantly had to take her back and forth to the doctor before we eventually found out that she has like respiratory issues. So we was dealing with that. She wasn't meeting her developmental milestones. So we was trying to get her caught up on things that she should have been doing that a normal 8-month-old child was doing that she wasn't doing. But I ended up moving back in with my parents, so that helped a lot. All three of us moved in with my parents, and I was able to. My mom was able to help me a lot with them. My friends helped me a lot with them, getting them on a schedule and a routine, and trying to get them acclimated into our lives and what I don't want to say a normal life is like, but the 10-year-old has seen so much, she didn't really know what was okay and what was not. Because she saw a lot of things that she shouldn't have seen. So there was a lot of therapy involved for both of them. There was a lot of relearning how to do certain things, a lot of redirection, a lot of structure that needed to be put in place. And so there was times when we had a lot of behavior issues with the oldest, and it caused some rifts in the home. But we got through it with a lot of support. And at first, I was originally supposed to adopt both of them, but the biological dad did not want to relinquish his rights to her. He wanted her to stay with me, but he did not want to relinquish his rights. And that just wasn't going to work because I can't be a forever foster parent, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then ultimately, I did become a foster parent because there were certain benefits that children in foster care get that I wanted them to have. So I went through the classes to become a foster parent, and all of the paperwork. And I've been a foster parent, I think now for it'll be 2 years in June that I became a foster parent. But I did that mainly for them so that they can get what they needed, and not just now, but later on. She'll get assistance for college, and she'll get insurance until she's 18. So just things that they offer children in foster care, I wanted them to have.
Wow.
So when they decided that she would go with her brothers to, the oldest would go with her brothers to her dad, I ultimately said that I wanted to keep Zoe. And at one point they did try to, I don't want to say take her, but they tried to put her with remember I told you she had two other siblings. So those two other siblings had the same dad as Zoe. So the system likes to keep sibling groups together, whether or not there's a relationship. So they wanted to see about putting Zoe with the other two children so that those siblings, those full-blooded siblings, could grow up together. Well, I have a very close relationship with that mom of those two children. And she's like, I'm not taking your child from you. No, you've had her all these years. She never grew up with them. So there's no relationship. The relationship is here with us. And thankfully, I had a great worker who saw that it would be detrimental for her to leave now, especially since she's been with me since she was a baby. And we're the only family that she knows. And they kind of fought for her to stay with us.
Wow.
And now here we are. We've done the paperwork. We've done the termination of rights. We've done what they call the diligent search, where you make sure that there are no other relatives that can take her, which we had some relatives come out and say that they wanted to take her in, but it just didn't pan out. And I just think it was just God's way of saying she's meant to be here.
Wow, that's
She's
awesome.
supposed to be with us.
We're gonna go. That's an amazing story. And I'm gonna share why that's important and why I've always admired you and the story of Zoe, and I'll share my own personal thing with that. But let me go to the Williams. I want them to kind of chime in because you guys have a blended family, and give us some of your story, give us your history, and let us know about you guys.
So again, I'm Cameron, and this is my wife, Alexis. We've been married for almost 2 years now. We started dating about 4 years ago. We met at church, at Tabernacle Baptist Church, serving in youth ministry. During that time, well, I didn't have a child of my own at that time. Alexis had Mason. He was two and a half. And we started dating during that time.
So we started dating. Mason was about 2 and a half, And Cameron had a relationship with him outside of us already from volunteering in the youth. And then Mason has always been a Tabernacle kid. And so they kind of grew together a lot closer than we did. They had their own relationship before we even thought about a relationship, got in a relationship or any of that. And then it just kind of just flowed pretty natural. So once we started dating, I introduced Mason to him, of course, in a different light, like outside of Tabernacle, several months down the road, and it just kind of grew. And their bond has just been something that it just flowed like naturally.
Let me raise this before you get into it, because I think that is an interesting one. And I would ask Cameron and Alexis, you having a son, Cameron, you not having one. What was your thinking in dating at that time? Because, as we get older, most people have that piece where, I'm not going to see someone who has a child, right? Or someone who has a child say, well, I'm not going to introduce them to that other person until I'm sure, right? Until I know for certain it's going to be. How did y'all navigate that early part of it as you continue to tell that story? Was that an issue for you, Cameron? Was that something you thought about, Alexis? How did y'all navigate that space?
So prior to us starting dating, I just was kind of just focusing on us. I had started that grad school that same year. So I was in grad school, full-time job, full-time single mom. That's another job. And so I just was like focusing on me, focusing on us, growing, trying to get to the next level. And then it just kind of happened. And so one of the things I remember, we had a date, and he was like, well, Mason is always invited. And I don't want you to ever think you have to put him to the side or, anything. He says, I just want you to know that it was like an ice cream date. And I was like, okay. And I really appreciated that. And I said, not right now. I just want to see. And then, we can kind of go from there. But that kind of helped me relax a little bit, because beforehand, I'm like, it was something new. How do you date seriously with someone? I don't want to introduce him to different people or any of that. And so Cameron was the first person that I introduced Mason to, and it worked.
He be the last one, right? Cameron, how you feel?
He be the last.
So
How was that for you?
I didn't have any reservations with it, because I guess I knew what I was getting into when I asked her out on a date. I mean, again, to go back a little bit, we knew each other for years before me ever asking her on a date, with going to church together for probably 4 years before, before she had Mason. I knew her a little bit. So I guess it wasn't like I was out and I met her and I didn't know she didn't have a child. So it wasn't anything to me. I love children. I work with children. Didn't have my own at the time, but I had a heart for children. So it wasn't a problem to me.
Okay. Now take me through it. So y'all start dating, obviously hit it off. Things is rocking and rolling. Take me from there and what that looked like.
So it moved very, very quickly. When you talk about dating, we both were, especially with her being a mom, we were intentional. We talk about this all the time. She asked me what I want, and we really both was not looking to date. It just organically happened. Again, after knowing her for 4 years, I never tried to talk to her, and something sparked one day, and I asked her out on a date, and it went from there. And in a year and a half, we were married. Within, how long was it for engagement? About 8 months. We were engaged, and it moved very, very fast. It was just organic.
Wow.
So one of the things we also did was we did those like Bible plans. The Bible app is like amazing. So we would find like a Bible plan centered to what we were trying to grow in or what we were dealing with at the time. And so we would just start our day, we would join the plan together and then put our notes in. And then like once the plan was over with, we'll, talk about it and see, what we thought of the plan. Some of the plans was like, oh, that wasn't it. But then some of them were like, yes, this was good. And it gave us like really good ideas and good insight for dating biblically. And then, trying to blend families. I mean, the Bible app has a plan for every single thing, every avenue, everything that you're going through in life it's a plan that's geared towards that. And so that kind of really helped. And so it helped us date with purpose. And we just took it from there. Like you said, just kind of organically, and it just naturally happened. And then we're getting towards like the fall time. And so there was like an outside event. And that was the first time that we did something, the three of us together. And so we was trying to see, how it happened. And Mason was all for it, happy. We got pictures from that day, and just like Mason it was happy. And if you know Mason, he don't too much food, many people, especially not at that age.
Yes,
But
absolutely. Yeah, he
he was fine.
A peculiar little fella.
Yeah.
No.
Another thing is that we dated very privately. Even going to church together, we didn't sit together. We spoke, but we dated very privately to make sure this is what we really wanted. I mean, we were short with it, but we didn't want to create this thing that wasn't going to be forever.
Cool. And so now you speed, you get married, you now have your own child. I want to get to something, and I'm gonna go to Brittany real quick, but I want y'all to think about this. Because I love you guys' story. Thank y'all for allowing us to be a part of it. Because I do want to talk about how do you navigate that space? Because Cameron, you're not Mason's biological. Correct. And how do you navigate that space? Are there's guidelines? Alexis, are you saying are there guidelines? How do we deal with the outside parent? Because I think that's important. For me personally, I was raised by my grandparents, but my mom got remarried. So I had a stepfather, right? And I ain't gonna front, as I got older, I was quick to remind him, hey man, you ain't my daddy. Now Mason, he ain't said that, and we ain't never saying he is. But I want you to really think about what that, as y'all continue to grow, as you continue to think through that, how does that look, Cameron? How do you feel, even as the non-biological, and navigating that space, and how you guys have, as a couple, for the other parent, or what advice and things would you give on that? So I'm gonna come back to you. I'm gonna go to Brittany because I think her story is also phenomenal on that piece. But I really want y'all to kind of think through that when I come back about what that looks like. All right, Britt, back to you. So here we are. I think, let me tell you why your story is powerful to me. I was adopted by my grandparents at 14 months of age. And so to see you with Zoe, who we love to call Toot, and where we last picked up was, here you are, dropped on your step. You started that week at school, teacher Brittany, and by the end of the week, you are mom Brittany.
Right.
You talked about the adjustments you made, but by the time you left off your story, you were really saying like, okay, the oldest, the one that was the original one, is now being claimed by her biological father. And now this child that you honestly didn't even know was part of the equation has now come to you. You talk about developmental issues, and I understand most people don't realize both my parents were addicted to drugs. One of the main reasons that I had to be adopted by my grandparents. So I do know what it is to be addicted at that age. It was in my system, just from that. And to hear my grandmother give the story about having to wean me and do that as well. So here you are, you get that. She's 8 months old. And now we're fast forwarding. Give us, what's that in between time? When did it hit you? I want to make this a forever thing. Like, I know when I signed up to be a foster parent, initially I didn't know it was going to be, I initially wanted to come in. I just didn't want them staying in the Salvation Army for a night. Right. How did you go from that moment to just thinking, I don't want them to stay in the Salvation Army, to now where you are here, really on the precipice of becoming, fully adopting Zoe? Can you fill in those blanks for us? Because I think that's incredible. And what was your mindset, and what was the things you were thinking through that brought you to this place?
I honestly don't know. I really feel like it was instant, because when you bring children into your home and you genuinely care for them, there's a bond that's going to form. So much so you don't want anything to happen to them. And my concern was that if they went back home to their mom or even to their dads at that point, I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't trust the situation. there was a lot of drug use between all parties involved, a lot of mental health issues that weren't being addressed. And me wanting what's best for them felt like it was best for them to be with me. So at that time, and speaking with the oldest, because she was able to vocalize, what she wanted. So initially, of course, she wants to go with her mom. That's all kids, regardless of what they've done, they all want their mom. But I think, and I gave her that space to feel like that. But I think as she worked through therapy, and her therapist really had to break down a lot of walls, because kids, they put their parents on this pedestal. And I think that she kind of was blind to some of the things that happened to her. Even so much so to she would talk to me about it as if, and I don't know how candid you want me to be, but some of the things that she would tell me, she would just say it so matter of fact. And I'm like, it's not okay for somebody to pull a gun out on you. That's not.
And she's
normal.
10, 11 at this time.
Right. And that was before she came to me, so this person that's supposed to be your parent, that's, you see that as discipline, but that's not okay. And so getting past that point, or she, of course they make excuses, and say that she was just upset, or she was mad, or I did something. But once we got through that and she realized that that's not a healthy way to react, and no one should ever put their hands on you in that way. Some of the things that you've seen, some of the things that you was exposed to, that's not okay. I think she realized and she saw the situation for what it was, and she wanted better. She wanted different. So then once she expressed to me that she wanted to stay and she wanted to be adopted, that's when I kind of pushed when it came to her. Now, the baby was a little bit different because she didn't have a voice. She couldn't tell you what she wanted, but she also couldn't tell you what was wrong. So I think I fought more or harder for her in the beginning because I wanted to make sure that she was safe, because she couldn't tell you if something was wrong. With the oldest, I didn't want her to be here if she didn't want to be. So if you want to be with your mom, if your mom can get to a healthy space, then I'm okay with that. But we never could get to that point that her mom was able to care for any of them. So her dad actually did, everything that he was asked to do. He also had some drug issues he had to overcome. He did all of his checked all the boxes. And so at that point, we did some family counseling with all of them, because there's a stepmom involved too. And there are two other children that live with her dad, because her dad has two other children with the stepmom. So there was a lot of family counseling because there was some resentment there on the oldest part, because she felt as though her dad left her there with her mom to deal with that, because she called him several times to come get her and he never did. So we had to get past that point. And I think once we got to an okay space, I felt better about her going there. And she felt better about her going there. And I felt like, if he didn't want me to adopt her, then the next best thing would be for him to get her. I felt okay with the progress that he made on his case plan. And apparently the judge did too. So they had a stable home. He had clean drug screens. They went through marital counseling. They went to individual counseling. He did family counseling. And and he never missed a court date, and I think that speaks volumes, where, even though you knew you was on the bad end of things and you probably was going to get in trouble by the judge because of certain things, he still managed to show up. He always showed up. He never not. He made every visitation. And I think that speaks volumes to the fact that he was intent about getting his kids. And so I was okay at that point with her
Really,
going.
like honestly, and I don't mean to cut you off,
Mhm.
but were you? I mean, we're gonna get onto the wonderful feeling of getting Zoe, but the original one, the oldest one, you had a
Mhm.
connection with. And I know, and I hear you saying that I was proud, you know, the father stepped up. But how did you deal with that? Because she then ultimately goes, how did you
Right.
wrestle with that feeling? Because you were connected with them. I seen you
I
with,
did.
yeah. How
I
did you
did.
manage
It
that?
wasn't all unicorns and rainbows either.
Mm.
So a lot of people don't know the struggles that we went through. Like she also deals with some mental health things too. So it was not always fun because and I had to put myself back in counseling because I didn't know how to deal with it. But I became the surrogate mom. So
Mm.
every bit of frustration she felt towards her mom came at me.
Mm.
So sometimes there was a strain in our relationship because she was so angry, but she couldn't focus it on the person that she was upset with. It would come towards my way.
Mm.
So we tried, I mean, everything that her counselor would recommend, everything that my counselor would recommend. She even went to see a psychiatrist because they felt like medication would make things better, and it would be okay for a while, but then we would be back to where it started. And a lot of it is not her fault. You know, it's what she's seen, it's what she's been exposed to. It's some of it is mental health,
Mm.
but at the end of the day, I think when dad decided to step in and step up and she made the decision that she wanted to go, I was okay. Because at one point I wasn't okay
Mm.
at all. Like the stress of, because at that time she was about 12. So at that time, constantly dealing with the backlash of having a child who is angry and frustrated and having that come at you all the time can become draining.
Wow.
And a lot of these foster children are like that. You know, you have to know what you're getting yourself into. I mean, dealing with it got so bad to where, I mean, we was having issues at school, issues at home when I'm not there, um, issues with peers, and so it wasn't as glamorized as some people try to make it seem.
Mm.
I didn't tell everybody what was going on because it's not, you know, everybody doesn't need to know your business.
Mhm.
But there are some people who are very close that will come and try to assist and try to help and try to mentor that situation. But some of it, I think, you have to want to do better.
Mm.
You have to want a different life. And I think once the newness wore off and you saw that, you know, yes, you get a stable home, you get nice things, but I also have rules.
Mm.
And I think one time, this is how I knew that she was raised differently. She asked me, why did she have to respect adults?
Mm.
And you know, you growing up, that's just instilled in you. You know, your parents teach you respect those that are older than you. But
Mhm.
when you've grown up in a home where you're the adult taking care of younger siblings, you feel like you're on an even playing field with the other adults in the home. And
Mm.
she's used to talking to them like they're the same age. But when you come into that home, remember I said that I had to provide a lot of structure and a
Mhm.
lot of boundaries and rules. You don't like that initially. You know,
Wow.
it's because that's not what you're used to. And so of course you push back and you fight it, even though you know that that's what that child needs.
Wow.
Now, I still have a relationship with her. I still talk to her. You know, I still care about her, but I feel as though I did what I was supposed to do. I prayed about it and I asked God to show me what you would have me be in her life. If it
Mm.
is for me to adopt her, make it so. If not, show me what I'm supposed to do. And at that point, I got a piece about her father. I felt as though I was just supposed to be the safe haven until he was able to get it together.
Wow.
And then once he was able to get it together, I helped put those pieces in place so that she could go over there and be successful. And, I instilled those things in her that she didn't have before. I showed her things that I gave her her very first birthday party. I gave her her very first Christmas where they got to open up things. So there are memories that I was able to give her for the very first time at the age of 10, 11, and 12 that she can take on forever. But I was not meant to be her forever home.
Wow.
I was just meant to be her stop along the way.
Wow. That's powerful. I want to put a pin there because I think that, and many people who are considering adoption, being a foster parent, this is great information to know. Because once again, you have to be able to live in that tension. And I want to publicly applaud you, especially in her case, for saying, God, if it's not meant for this to be, let me run this part of the race and of her journey well, to make sure that she gets into a place that's going to be best for her. Thank you for sharing that. I think a lot of people are going to be helped through that transparency of that moment, because most people don't realize it's a tough place in that foster parent role and those other things and trying to navigate that. So I thank you for sharing that. And I'm gonna go to the Williams, but I want to come back to you, Brittany, and I want you to talk about, even though the oldest one is now with her father, to complete that story for us, for little Zoe, and what that's been like for you on that end. All right. Back to Alexis and Cameron. So you guys, I raised that question before. And the reason I did that, because I really admire that, because there are a lot of people who have non-negotiables, don't know how to date with children, don't know how to work that space out. And then I've seen the other end of it. As I stated before, I've seen people get together and then their children, there's resentment. One is saying, well, you're not my father. And the other one starts to take it out on their spouse or significant other where, that's not my child. So you have these issues about connectivity. And one thing I will say, I was very impressed with you guys' wedding because y'all made sure you were intentional. Cameron, you were very intentional, Alexis, to include Mason in that process, right? To include him in this covenant together. Can y'all talk about that? I know I raised some questions and I would love to hear your perspective on what that looks like. How do we include that? There's many people who are listening who are in the same seat you're in. They're step parent. They're trying to navigate, how do we manage the outside parent? How do I do that? So share a little bit, if you will, on some of the things we kind of raised, and I would love to hear some of your insight on that.
So one of the things you mentioned was the wedding. So I'll kind of start with there. Is when we started dating and then of course engagement and getting married. One of the things is I didn't ever want Mason to feel like he was being replaced or that his thoughts and things didn't matter either, because for so long it was just him and I. And so, well, him and I have a four-legged child too. So it was the three of us, but I didn't want him to ever think, well, now mommy is dating. And so now everything is getting ready to change. So when we were planning the wedding, I wanted to make sure like he was involved in everything. Even when we were expecting the child, how we told him, we made sure we centered it around him as he's getting ready to be a big brother and everything. Because I wanted to be really intentional about making sure he still knows that he is, just as important as he was beforehand. And then, I mean, that's taken a lot of conscious thinking. It's taken a lot of prayer. And like Cameron and I will talk it out, or we'll, try to discuss things and just, I know you had said something about like the discipline and things. And so it just kind of grows. Beforehand, Cameron will be like, Lexus, da 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 da. And so now as time goes on, he's more comfortable with, discipline, or I'm more comfortable. And Mason has been receptive to that. And so I always try to keep that line of communication to him, for him to always talk about it. And I also scheduled an appointment with a therapist, child therapy for him as well, because I want mental health is real. it's just as important as physical health and everything else. And so I wanted, he's in 6 years, he's dealt with a lot of changes. And so I just want to make sure he's always in a space mentally. And so us putting that as the focus, it kind of helps us like grow to do whatever we need to do, if that makes sense.
No, that makes, and that's one of the things that I'm glad that you're saying. You and Brittany and others that we're sharing, I appreciate your honesty and transparency about therapy. You know, that's one of the hardest things to try to enforce and for our communities to embrace is the realities of therapy. I'm big. You can, yes, I got Jesus Christ, but also got a counselor, right?
Yeah.
Like these are important parts, and not just individually, but I appreciate y'all both explaining that y'all needed this and the help for your family dynamics. And y'all have vastly different family dynamics, but you realize we need this external help, the therapy to kind of put that in. So thank y'all again for being very open and honest. And many people are watching. I hope that frees you to say, hey, I really need to look at this. It's okay. It's okay to have a counselor. It's okay to be on someone's couch. It's okay for our kids to have therapy, right? Like that's important. So thank y'all for sharing that as well. Cameron, what's your thoughts?
So again, as Alexis said this word, and I said it a little earlier, being intentional. That was our whole big thing when we got together. We got engaged. It's being intentional. We talk about it. We make it plain. We always talking about make it plain. So the whole fatherhood piece evolved more when we got married and became under one roof. That's when it seemed to me to be real. You know, dating, yes, I was doing things, but when we got in the house together, things evolved, and it just honestly came natural. We didn't set, you know, these set in stone rules of you can't tell him to do this or this, that, and the third. Again, he's never questioned who I am versus his biological dad, because it's been since age 2 that 2.5 that I've been around. So, and now it's age 6. So it's evolved again organically throughout those years. It just flows. There's never been a force of what to call me. There's never been anything forced on giving respect. For 4 years, I guess he's learned that, and he's chosen what he want to call me, and how the relationship goes.
Wow.
Again,
what did he decide to call you? What was it that you was cool with?
He called me dad.
Wow. Okay, that's awesome.
So we got home one day. We had went out to eat after church, and Cameron, you know, gets there super early. That's not Mason and I. We get to the second service. He was there for first service, and so we went out to eat, and we were coming back home. And Mason rode with me, and he says, "Mom, I'm going to surprise," because he was calling him Mr. Cameron at first. He says, "Mommy." I said, "Yes." He said, "I'm going to surprise Mr. Cameron." I said, "You are?" He's like, "Yes." He's like, "I'm going to call him Daddy." And I was just like, it's just taken back, you know, because I mean, he came to that decision all on his own. And he's such a critical thinker. Like Mason is always like, something is always going on in his head. And so just for him to just say that, I was just like, you know, wow. And then Cameron, you know, walked into the house and he said it, and he hasn't stopped since.
That's awesome. That's amazing. Mason is very, very cerebral. So I do think that's unique. How's it been? I mean, are there things you're anticipating? I want to your time, and I appreciate y'all value your time. So I only got about 1 or 2 more questions for each. And the one I would love to say for you to think on, Cameron and Alexis, is what advice would you give to people in your situation in creating this family? So here you are, Cameron, no children. Alexis, you have a son and a 4-legged child. You said it was in the house. Y'all come together. You're intentional about dating. You get married. Now you have your own child together and trying to navigate that space. I want you to think about it. I'm gonna go to Brittany, but when I come back to you, what advice would you give the people in your space? Because I could make the argument that you're more the norm, especially in our culture, than what we talked about earlier about traditional relationships. So I want you to think about that. Alexis, from your perspective, Cameron, from your perspective. And I know that y'all are fairly new in this, but I appreciate your wisdom and I really appreciate you guys' maturity and to share some insight to others who are facing that? What would you say to them who are in those same similar situations and relationships? Because I think it's very, very valuable. All right, Brittany, back to you. Talk to me about, now that the oldest one back is with her father, but we have this little baby that has kept. So on one hand, you've got to wrestle with that tension of one's leaving, but then one's staying. Or so did you think it would get to that point? And so fill in the gaps, give us some information. And yeah, I just would love to hear how this story kind of is concluding to where we are now.
Well, I was concerned about how Zoe would take the oldest one leaving, because they were close. That was really the only sibling that she had a relationship with, because she left the boys at 8 months, and then the other two she never met before, other than outside of the visits that we put together, the foster parents put together. So I was concerned that she was too young to kind of understand, but I knew that she would miss her presence. And at that age, you really can't have a conversation with her to explain to her what's going on. So emotionally, I just wanted her to be okay. Um, so I wasn't as concerned about the oldest leaving, because she knew. She knew that there was a timeline. She knew that there were certain things that her dad and stepmom had to put in place before she could go. She was given a projected end date, so it was not like a surprise. We prepared for that moment. Now, when the pandemic hit, it really made things, I don't I don't know if it made it easier, but it made it different, because the learn from home aspect, because originally they wanted to wait until school was over, because they would be moving to a different county, and they didn't want the children to have to change schools. Well, when the pandemic hit and everybody was learning from home, the process was kind of sped up a little bit, because they could still do their work but do it at dad's house. So during that time, they went there, but it was on like a trial basis. So she still was in custody, and there still was someone looking out for them, and that made me feel better, because I needed eyes. There was still an extra set of eyes on what was going on, making sure that what they presented to us is not just the facade, like they're actually doing these things in the home. But then it kind of got drug out a little bit, because then court shut down. And so it's kind of like, okay, yeah, they're here, but can you really do a visit? Because there was really putting parameters on DFACs where they couldn't go in homes, and they couldn't, do their normal visitation. So a lot of things were being done on Skype and virtual, but the reports that I got back were positive. They said that everything appeared to be good. They still was doing counseling, but everything was being done virtually at that point. So when everything was set in stone, it was last summer, I think they did the final court hearing, and all the information that was presented to them was positive. One of the main things, though, was that the relationship between mom and the kids didn't need to happen right now, because it would make their progress regress. Now, I am aware that has not happened, that there is communication, and I know that has caused some issues in that home, with the relationship between stepmom, dad, mom, and then also kind of playing sides a little bit, where you're not, like, as you mentioned before, like, you're not my real mom, I'm going to call my mom to tell my mom on you, type of thing. So they didn't follow that rule, where there shouldn't have been communication between the kids and mom, and I know that has caused some rifts in the home, but I kind of try to stay out of it, because I don't want to insert myself into that situation, because I could also be seen as another scapegoat, and I don't want to cause any other issues. So my communication is strictly with the child. I don't talk to any of the adults, but I do allow, she has my number, so she does reach out to me. I send packages and things for holidays and birthdays and things of that nature. I send pictures so that she's able to see Zoe. And honestly, the transition with Zoe was seamless. I mean, she asked about her a couple of times, but at that age, out of sight, it's kind of like out of sight, out of mind type of thing. So she didn't really go through any emotional distress like I thought that she would. I still have pictures up in the home of all the kids. I have pictures of all 6 of them, even the ones that she didn't live with, so that she, when she's older, she can understand that you do have other siblings that are out here, and some are being raised by other families. So she wouldn't be the only one that had gotten adopted. And I do want to keep that, when the time is right, keep that open for her, so that she knows that there are 5, 6 right now, 6 other kids out there, because mom just had another baby.
Well, wow. Awesome. I'm going to come back to you after go to Wings. And the final question I'm going to ask you, Brittany, for those people out there watching who are considering adoption or being a foster parent, what would you tell them? And I would just ask that you give them some insight about what that is, some things to think through in that piece. All right. So we'll be right back with you. So Cameron, Alexis, give us some insight as people who are in you guys' particular situation and family dynamics. What's some things you would say?
I say strengthen within. We see social media can have us thinking, like you said, that white picket fence and all of this stuff, and so it kind of clouds your judgment. And so one of the things I can appreciate that we did was we communicated within. We weren't really public beforehand, so we kind of were able to become us without all of that extra unsolicited advice that you receive from everyone. So that's one of the biggest things I can say is like, just focus on us and realize what may work for one person may not work for you. And just because it works for you doesn't mean it's going to work for everybody else. So just being flexible and open to doing whatever you have to do for the sake of your family. And making sure that your family comes first. And when I say family, that immediate family. So, within the household, not even everyone that's outside of the household, close friends of that nature, just making sure what's working for us that lives in this house and making sure we're communicating across the board and going from there. Of course, yes, we'll take advice from different things, but realizing, at the end of the day, it's our judgment call and being okay with that call that we make.
Wow. Cameron.
It's crazy that she says this because in my mind, I'm saying somewhat the same thing. Create your own story. Your storyline don't have to be the same as anybody else. What happens in your house is your house. The way you navigate it is your way. Be okay with creating your own story, creating the way your family goes, without all the outside stuff or what everyone think it should be. Just be okay and just communicate. Talk about what it is you want and what you think, how you think it should go, and come together on that one accord.
Man, that's awesome, man. Guys, thank y'all so much. I really appreciate that. Brittany, last thing I asked you, I want you to raise that. What's some ideas and some insights and things that you would give to people considering adoption or being a foster parent? What would you say to them?
First thing, I think TV kind of does glamorize it, because it's not that easy. As I told you, I got Zoe when she was 8 months and she's 3 now. We're still not done with the process. So one of the first things I would tell people is just know what you're getting yourself into. Getting a baby, a lot of people want to adopt a baby. That's hard because oftentimes you're not going to just get a baby. They come as a package deal, or there's a waiting list. I think it's a 3-year waiting list for
4
people
to 5.
who just want babies. So getting into this for a baby it's not going to happen tomorrow like you think it is. And even when you go through the foster care system, you have to understand that there's a chance that you won't adopt. Because sometimes parents do get it together, and you can have that child in your home and be attached to that child. But if that parent gets it together and the judge awards custody back to that parent, you have to give them up. And so it's hard to say don't get attached, because you do. When you're the primary caregiver for these children day in and out, you do get attached. So you have to know that there's a possibility that at any time something can happen. And I think that was the scary part for me, because there was always something, always a threat that if they move one child and they have to move both, because there's that siblings have to stay together rule. But it didn't make sense in our case, because if the plan was for 3 of them to go with the dad, that's not the dad. So why are we moving one child? So I had, luckily, a lot of people that supported me. And I think PG, I even called you one time for a letter of support, because we really had to fight to keep her here. So know your rights and speak up for what you feel is in the best interest of the children in your home, regardless of what someone is telling you may be in the best interest. If you know in your heart that that's, one, legally not right, and 2, won't be mentally and soundly good for that child, say something. Do what you have to do. But sometimes it is out of your hands. So if that relative came and that relative proved to be a valuable resource, then she would have trumped me, even though Zoe had been with me all these years. I thank God that something happened to where they couldn't clear her as a resource, but that could have been 2 years that I spent with that child, and now she's gone. So just understanding that anything can happen when you're dealing with a child in foster care, and that it's a process. It takes a very long time. It'll be 3 years in September, and I'm hoping that we're done by then, but there still is no guarantee that we'll be done by then. I am lucky enough to be one of the ones to get her as a baby, but again, it came with an older sibling. So a lot of people want you to take in sibling groups. So know that, and know that these kids come with a lot of baggage. They come with a lot of trauma. They come with a lot of misconceptions. So be ready to deal with all of that and have a good support system, because you're going to need it to get through some of that trauma and those misconceptions, and use the resources that you have, including therapy or mentorships or support groups, to help you get through that, because it really can wear you down as a parent.
Wow. Brittany, thank you so much for sharing. We're praying for you. And little Zoe, thank you again for just really giving us tremendous insight, especially when it comes to fostering and adoption. And to Cameron and Alexis, thank you all so much for so much that you shared with us tonight. Blended families, dating intentionally, stepdad, and all these dynamics, man. Thank you guys so much. Please give our love to Mason and his little baby sister. And thank you all for tuning in tonight. This has been an amazing conversation. I hope that you gleaned so much. I thank them publicly for just sharing, and I thank you for tuning in. So once again, this is our family month, Unmuted with PG, and tonight we dealt with blended families. I have really been helped and encouraged, and I know you have as well. Once again, we love you. We say this all the time, because we've been blessed. We're going to be a blessing. Take care. Talk to you soon. Peace.